Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Language Arts Gallery. If it's your first time watching my channel, please like, subscribe, and comment. And in today's video, we're going to discuss the block method for the comparative essay. So comparative essay writing is really important. It's an important genre of academic writing. This is because this is something that students often encounter on standardized testing exams, standardized essay exams. So there are two main approaches that students can take with the comparative essay. The first is a little bit more complicated. It's the point-by-point method. And the second, the one we're going to discuss today, is a little bit easier, and that's the block method. So we're going to talk about exactly what the block method is. We're going to look at a model essay so we can see what this approach really looks like. And I've talked in previous videos about the importance of the 5-paragraph essay. And the 5-paragraph essay, teaching that to our students, especially to our English language learners, is really important. And the block method of comparative writing actually is a little bit different because it's got 4 paragraphs. But we still have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And if you've informed students about the rhetorical features of academic writing, then they should be able to adapt to this pretty quickly. And as I said, it is more straightforward than the point-by-point method. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the comparative essay, and we're going to start with the block method. And if you check the description in the video, you can find out where you can get the complete comparative essay in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. So we're going to talk about what the block method is. We're going to look at this model essay, and we'll talk a little bit about how this essay has the same rhetorical features of all academic writing. And we'll go over some strategies that you can use when you're brainstorming with your students. So what does a comparative essay do? Well, it compares and contrasts two things. And when we compare two things, we're talking about the similarities. And when we contrast them, we're talking about the differences. So let's take a look at an example here. And I'm not going to read through this whole essay, but in this essay, our students are talking about the similarities and differences between primary school and secondary school. So remember, argument's the basis for academic writing. And we can see here in the first paragraph, our student says, while there are some similarities, they are mostly very different. So he's got a clear opinion. He's laying out his thesis statement. Okay, and as we can see, there aren't 5 paragraphs here. I said earlier, there are only 4. We've got our introductory paragraph right here, and we've got our concluding paragraph. But instead of 3, we've only got 2 body paragraphs here. You can see in the first body paragraph, the author talks about the similarities. And in this paragraph, he talks about the differences. So that's one of the key differences between this approach to academic writing, or this approach to the comparative essay, and the point-by-point method. So the body paragraphs are structured a little bit differently, but it has a lot of the same rhetorical features. It has an introduction that has a hook. It lays out the roadmap for the reader. It's got a clear thesis, and it's got a concluding paragraph with all the same features of a good conclusion. It signals the end of the essay, it restates the thesis, it summarizes the main points, and it's got a concluding thought. But we can see there are some differences in the body paragraph. Okay, so we talked a little bit about that introduction and how the author's got a clear thesis. So this is important. A lot of people think that in comparative essay writing, we're just listing similarities and differences. And it's important to note it depends on the question. If your teacher asks you to simply list, then you're going to list. If they ask you to compare and contrast, then you're going to want to make a thesis statement. You're going to say, here are some similarities, here are some differences. They're mostly similar, or they're mostly different. Okay, so that's really important. If you say they're mostly similar, the body of your essay should show that they're mostly similar. Don't say they're mostly similar and then list all the ways that they're different. You don't want to highlight all the differences, because that's not going to do a very good job of proving your academic argument. And we can see the conclusion here. The author signals the end to the essay. He restates his ideas and his thesis, and he leaves us with a good concluding thought. Understanding the similarities and differences between these topics will help students have a more enjoyable and productive school experience. I think that's a great concluding sentence. So we've talked a little bit about what the conclusion includes. Let's take a look here at exactly what the block method is, because that's what we're here to learn about today. So we've got our introduction, which we talked about, and we've got our conclusion. In our first paragraph, that's where we're going to talk about the similarities between the two things that we're comparing. So in our example, the students comparing primary school and secondary school. In that first paragraph, you're going to talk about all the similarities. In the second paragraph, you're going to talk about all the differences between primary school and secondary school. I like this method because it's really simple. There's not a huge focus on comparative language. We're still going to use comparative language, particularly in that second paragraph where we've got to discuss some differences. But I think it's a lot more straightforward, especially for our English language learners. And if it's your first time watching, I work a lot with English language learners, so that's why I'm very sensitive to their needs. So when you're going over brainstorming your block comparative essay with your students, you're going to think, first of all, about what are you comparing? What are your topics for comparison? So we're going to talk more in future videos about topics for comparison and points of comparison. We'll talk more about that when we get to the point-by-point method, but we're going to want to make sure that we select two topics for comparison. And your first topic is going to go in your outer circle on your left, and your second is going to go in your outer circle on your right in this Venn diagram. And of course, in the center, that's where we're going to list all of our similarities. So these are the things unique to topic 1 and unique to topic 2. So here's an example of how my student did this, laying out the differences between elementary and secondary school. So we have lessons with different teachers, we have homework, we have tests that rank us in class, we get to see our friends. Those are some similarities. There are a lot more similarities than that, but those are a few. And then we see some really stark differences here between elementary and secondary school. And I think that our author here did a great job of laying out these differences, and he's setting up some great points of comparison. So you can give your students some ideas as to what they can write about, things like the holidays, the seasons, topics related to school, or you can let them be creative and come up with their own topics for comparison. Okay, I do love using the Venn diagram with my students. It's simple, and regardless of grade level, students really seem to love this tool. So I want to go ahead and talk a little bit briefly about organizing our essay. So after we've got all this raw data, all this raw information on the similarities and differences, we're going to have to organize it a little bit. So our students can go through and they can say, okay, I'm going to talk about all 3 of these similarities. And I want to talk about 3 differences. I might talk about the time that school starts and finishes. So here, I've got a great point of comparison, the time that school finishes. And here's when elementary school starts and finishes, and here's when our secondary school starts and finishes. Activities in school, that's another point of comparison. And a third point of comparison would be dress or dress code. Students can wear normal clothing in elementary school, and in middle and high school, perhaps they have to wear a uniform. This is going to be different depending on what students you're dealing with, but those are 3 great points of comparison. Okay, so then you can go ahead and you can use a simple template like this to help your students draft. And here they've got an indication of what goes in each paragraph. So it really helps them to fit the pieces of the puzzle together, kind of like a Rubik's Cube. So I really love this approach. Thanks so much for tuning in and watching our video tonight on the block method of the comparative essay. Please remember to hit like, subscribe, and comment. And you can check out my Teachers Pay Teachers store for this lesson and for lots of other great academic writing lessons. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.